Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled A Global Spotlight on Ocean Defenders. This webinar is co-hosted by the Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy of the IUCN and the Ocean Defenders Project. First, as befits a talk on environmental human rights defenders, I want to start with a land and ocean acknowledgement. I'm presenting to you today from what is known as Vancouver, Canada, but it is also the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. The territories of these three groups includes both land and ocean components. This recognition is particularly important in the context of this discussion of ocean defenders, because it is often Indigenous people and other traditional rights holders who are the most connected to and impacted by ocean and coastal development, and who are also at the forefront of efforts to safeguard the marine environment and their rights. Second, let me introduce myself. My name is Nathan Bennett. I'm the chair of the IUCN People in the Ocean Specialist Group and also the Global Ocean Lead Scientist for WWF. I'll be your host in the webinar today. Through this webinar, we aim to bring greater visibility to the situation and plight of ocean defenders worldwide. In particular, this webinar will explore the ongoing struggles and efforts of ocean defenders globally and shed light on the potential avenues through which allies and organizations can provide support for and protection to ocean defenders. The webinar is structured as follows. First, we have opening remarks by the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment. Then I will provide a brief introduction to the topic of ocean defenders. Three speakers will present case studies of ocean defenders from around the world, and then we will have a talk on how allied organizations can best support ocean defenders. Next, there will be a video and two presentations from ocean defenders to share their experience and perspectives. And as time permits, we will pose some questions from attendees to the panelists. And finally, Kristen Walker-Painemia, chair of the Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy, will provide closing remarks. But before we proceed any further with the webinar, I just want to go through a few housekeeping items. First, just so everybody's aware, the webinar is being recorded and it will be posted afterwards. So feel free to turn your video off during the webinar. Otherwise, your video may be shown during when it's posted. Second, please remain muted at all times during the webinar, just so that we don't have interruptions. Finally, or fourth, if you have any questions for the panelists, please write those in the chat, and we will pose some of those at the end of the webinar. And then finally, hay una opción español. So if you're a Spanish speaker, there's a translation. Please click on the interpretation or translation button. And at one point in the webinar, we will be switching the order of the translation from Spanish to English rather than English to Spanish. Great. And now I am going to just open the webinar with some remarks by the UN Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights and the Environment, Dr. David Boyd. David Boyd is both the UN Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, and he's also an Associate Professor of Law, Policy, and Sustainability at the University of British Columbia. He has a PhD in Resource Management and Environmental Studies from UBC, a law degree from the University of Toronto, and a business degree from the University of Alberta. His career has included serving as the Executive Director of EcoJustice, appearing before the Supreme Court of Canada, and working as a Special Advisor on Sustainability for Canadian Prime Minister Paul Martin.
Hello, I'm Dr. David Boyd, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Human Rights and the Environment, and I'm delighted to be participating in this important IUCN webinar on ocean defenders. Today I want to talk about the consequences of the right to a healthy environment for oceans and ocean defenders. The right to a healthy environment has been recognized by the United Nations Human Rights Council in 2021, the General Assembly in 2022, and is recognized in law by 161 nations through constitutions, legislation, and the ratification of regional human rights treaties. The right to a healthy environment is critically important for the world's oceans because it includes healthy ecosystems and biodiversity, non-toxic environments, a safe climate, healthy and sustainably produced food, clean air, and safe and sufficient water. Those are the substantive elements of the right to a healthy environment. It also comes with procedural elements, including access to information about the oceans, public participation in decision-making about the oceans, and access to justice with effective remedies when people's right to a healthy environment is being threatened or violated. Now, of course, the threats to marine ecosystems and oceans are well known. The climate emergency, toxic pollution, plastics, overfishing, habitat destruction. These are all violations of the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And the people who are in the front lines in fighting for the health of oceans are called ocean defenders. These can be Indigenous peoples, people from small coastal communities, small-scale fishermen, women and girls, people whose rights are often most directly affected by the ecological degradation of marine ecosystems. Unfortunately, in today's world, these ocean defenders, like all environmental human rights defenders, are subject to harassment, intimidation, violence, including murder, and criminalization. This clearly has to stop. States have legal obligations to create safe environments for all human rights defenders, including ocean defenders. States have legal obligations to restore and conserve and protect the oceans, and states have legal obligations to respect, protect, and fulfill all human rights, including the right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. Now, the good news, if I can say that, is that we know that the right to a healthy environment is a catalyst for actions to protect and restore the world's oceans. A couple of quick examples. Civil society in Costa Rica has used their right to a healthy environment to protect habitat for sea turtles, to stop the bycatch of hammerhead sharks, and to overturn the approval of bottom trawling. The right to a healthy environment has been used in Kenya to stop a major coal port, in South Africa to stop offshore oil and gas exploration, and in the Philippines to overturn regulations that permitted destructive fishing practices. The right to a healthy environment has also been a catalyst for the creation of marine protected areas in a diverse range of countries, including Portugal, Croatia, and Papua New Guinea. So the bottom line is this: ocean defenders are heroes for the planet. We should respect, honor, and celebrate their work, and states have obligations to protect not only ocean defenders, but oceans themselves. Thank you very much.
Great. And thanks to Dr. David Boyd for those introductory remarks. Now, in the next section of the webinar, I'm going to provide a bit more of a background on ocean defenders, focusing on answering the basic questions of what, why, where, and how. And to close, I will also introduce the Ocean Defenders Project. The topic of environmental defenders is one that has received quite a bit of attention in recent years, from international organizations such as the United Nations, UNEP, the IUCN, and many environmental and civil society organizations at various scales around the world. Different terms have been used to refer to this idea: environmental defenders, land defenders, as well as environmental human rights defenders. The most used definition is that proposed by the previous UN Special Rapporteur, Michael Force, who defined environmental human rights defenders as individuals and groups who, in their personal or professional capacity and in a peaceful manner, strive to protect and promote human rights relating to the environment. He also recognized that land and environmental rights are interlinked and often inseparable, in particular for Indigenous peoples, other traditional resource users, and local communities. One thing you will note here is the lack of attention to oceans in this definition. And in essence, what we know about environmental defenders is as follows. There's an increasing global demand for resources at a global scale due to increasing population as well as consumption. And as a result, resource extraction and development projects are moving continually further into peripheral regions to meet this demand. And rural and resource-dependent communities and groups are often the ones bearing the brunt of the pressure. When this happens without adequate oversight and good governance, violations of human rights, land rights, and indigenous rights can occur. And understandably, these development pressures and rights violations are often met with strong opposition by and conflicts with local groups of environmental defenders. And because of the important work of organizations like Global Witness, Frontline Defenders, and the Alliance for Indigenous Environmental Defenders, we also understand that over the last bunch of years, there's been increasing threats to, violence against, and even murders of environmental defenders. For example, we know that the majority of the assassination of human rights defenders globally are land and environmental defenders. In 2021 alone, 69% of the documented 358 human rights defenders killed were land and environmental defenders. So as a result of this increased knowledge of the issue, attention to and support for environmental defenders has increased substantially in the last number of years. But what is happening in the marine and coastal context? What is the state of our knowledge, policy, practical, and philanthropic supports? Are we neglecting defenders of the ocean? The oceans cover 70% of the planet, and more than 2 billion people live near, are connected to, and depend on the oceans for livelihoods, food security, and cultural continuity. In other words, the human rights of these coastal populations depends on the ocean. The short story here is that definitions, policy documents, research, advocacy, and supports often neglect ocean defenders. Definitions of environmental human rights defenders mainly focus on land, freshwater, and terrestrial resources, but rarely specifically mention the ocean or marine resources. In most global legal and policy documents, there are few, if any, mention of defenders of ocean environments or marine resources. In terms of past research, most of the empirical work focuses on land defenders, with few case studies of ocean defenders. And documentation of deaths and murders capture terrestrial environmental defenders, but there are substantial gaps related to defenders of ocean or marine environments. As for advocacy and support, it's not totally clear, but it seems to follow on from these gaps above that there's limited attention in advocacy, technical, and financial support for ocean defenders. On the other hand, in civil society, there's emerging and increasing attention among social movements at all scales to ocean defenders. However, I would also note that many of the large environmental NGOs have been less active in and vocal in their support of both environmental human rights defenders in general and ocean defenders in particular. Noting these gaps, a few colleagues and I started to explore the topic of ocean defenders, and have written a couple of initial thought pieces to start to define terms, explore the underlying issues related to ocean defenders, and try to bring some attention to the topics. And more recently, we've also launched a project focused on ocean defenders, which I'll introduce shortly. But first, what is an ocean defender, and why are coastal populations around the world increasingly becoming ocean defenders? We define ocean defenders as individuals, groups, or communities who mobilize, advocate, or take action to protect the marine environment, their coastal and oceanic territories, and associated human rights against existential threats. And there's two things that I want to highlight about this definition. First, in our work, we seek to center the local rights holders and coastal communities as those who are at the forefront of efforts to safeguard the ocean and related rights. They have the most to gain and lose, and are often the ones being marginalized and threatened. Other individuals and organizations, of course, can also be allies in supporting the work of local ocean defenders. Second, ocean defenders should be differentiated from the local stewards who are proactively caring for the marine environment and local resources based on local knowledge, practices, and governance. Local environmental stewardship is very different from having to reactively defend against external threats. But next, why is this happening? What are these threats that are causing local people to have to become ocean defenders? The oceans have always been a site of economic activities. What is new is the scale and speed of growth of economic development in the oceans. Jouffre and colleagues in their recent paper call this phenomenon a blue acceleration. As global demand for resources has continued to grow and land-based sources have declined, reliance on the oceans for human needs and development has rapidly expanded. As a result, an unprecedented race is occurring among diverse and competing actors and nations for food, materials, and space. These authors show how this rapid acceleration is occurring across all sectors of the ocean economy, from aquaculture to deep sea mining, from shipping to marine tourism, and from offshore wind farms to marine genetic resources. They also show how this growth has picked up pace in recent years. And what's more, their prediction that the ocean economy could double or triple in the coming decades. And this blue acceleration is often occurring in peopled seas, at the coastal margins, or in inshore areas. And when blue growth happens in peopled seas, if left unchecked and not properly managed, it can produce a wide range of environmental injustices, social injustices, and human rights issues. There are different types of risks or social injustice that can occur as a result of blue growth, and this includes dispossession, displacement, and ocean grabbing, environmental justice concerns from pollution and waste, environmental degradation and reduction of availability of ecosystem services, livelihood impacts for small-scale fishers, lost access to marine resources needed for food security and well-being, inequitable distribution of economic benefits, social and cultural impacts for coastal communities, marginalization of women, human indigenous rights abuses, and exclusion from decision-making and governance. And of course, all of these justice issues can undermine the human rights of coastal populations, including economic, social, and cultural rights, as well as civic and political rights. It can undermine the unique rights of Indigenous people and small-scale fishers. It can undermine the rights of women, children, and other groups who are marginalized. And finally, it can undermine the right to a healthy and sustainable ocean environment. So that gets at the what and the why. Coastal populations' rights are being undermined, and understandably, that leads to oppositions. But what about where, who, and how? Because marine and coastal development is happening everywhere, various injustices and human rights issues are occurring everywhere in the ocean. This map from the EJ Atlas documents environmental justice conflicts around the world. And what you'll see is that a very large proportion of these issues are happening at the coastal margin. And thus, ocean defenders are also active everywhere in the world. For example, in our initial paper on ocean defenders, we explore a global set of examples of small-scale fishers struggling to protect their environment and rights from coastal and ocean development. And while our initial emphasis has been on small-scale fishers, perhaps because there's the most documentation of resistance efforts by these groups in recent years, the groups active in this space are much broader. Ocean defenders includes individuals and collectives of coastal communities, local citizens, small-scale fishers, Pacific Islanders, Indigenous peoples, women, and youth. What draws these groups together is that they're all actively opposing and defending against threats to their environment, their territories, and their rights. Our initial research also shows that local groups of ocean defenders are taking various types of actions, and this includes mobilizing social networks for collective action, organizing protests and occupations, researching and documenting the issues, communicating the issues with the media and raising public awareness, advocating for policy change or corporate social responsibility, engaging in lengthy legal battles, and doing local monitoring and enforcement efforts. These groups and communities are sometimes working alone and sometimes being supported by much broader networks of allied organizations. And this includes legal, media, research, and civil society organizations. Now, part of the story of ocean defenders is that, similar to environmental land defenders, there's evidence that they are often being silenced, criminalized, threatened, experiencing acts of violence, and getting murdered for their work to protect the environment. What's more, there are cases all around the world of both governments and corporate sector actors contributing to these issues. And just to name a few specific examples of deaths and murders, in Honduras in 1995, Jeanette Cawas Fernandez was killed for her work to protect a 40-kilometer area of the coast that was also important for development projects. In Costa Rica in 2013, Jairo Mora Sandoval was beaten and shot in front of international workers for protecting sea turtle nesting beach from illegal poaching. In Chile in 2018, the artisanal fisherman Alejandro Castro was found dead one day after organizing an anti-pollution demonstration against the Puchuncavi Quintero sacrifice zone. And in the Philippines in 2021, 9 environmental activists were killed and 6 others were arrested by combined police and military forces who savagely raided various houses and offices in different areas of southern Tagalog. However, from research that I have done reviewing past documentation of environmental defenders, it seemed like deaths and murders of ocean defenders is largely missing from the record. And furthermore, it seems that a lot of the time the perpetrators of violence or murders against ocean defenders get away without being punished. These perpetrators are often associated with the private sector and or governments. So in summary, ocean defenders include many groups who are doing important work to protect the marine environment and people's rights around the globe. There's evidence that they're facing threats, violence, and even being murdered for their important work. But they're not getting much attention in and support from policy, research, advocacy, and funding circles. And finally, there's major gaps in our understanding of ocean defenders, the scale of the issue and the scope of threats, and also how to address the issues that they are facing. So recognizing the scale of the issue and the gaps in everything from knowledge to practice, a group of us launched a collaborative project called the Ocean Defenders Project. The overarching goal of this project is to increase knowledge of, raise the profile of, and bring greater support to ocean defenders. To achieve the project aims, we developed 3 phases, which are to build the network knowledge base and raise the profile of the issue, to engage in outreach and engagement on solutions and next steps, and then to scale up and out to increase the impact of the work and to bring greater support to ocean defenders. At the current time, we're engaging in a number of activities, mainly under phase 1 and 2 of the project, and that includes gathering a working group, documenting a global set of case studies, launching a project website, presenting at a number of global conferences, and also as in this webinar for the IUCN. And also we'll be producing a series of different reports and publications. And while a solid knowledge of the issue is definitely the foundation of the project, the ultimate aim of the project is to really inspire many other individuals and organizations to get involved and take actions to support ocean defenders. And I do want to highlight here that the Ocean Defenders Project is really a broad group of collaborators and advisors. And here's a long list of some of those who've been involved in some way so far, some in giving us initial advice, others who are more collaborators on gathering case studies, and some who will be involved in a more formal advisory body. And of course, the network of collaborators and advisors is still growing. If you want to learn more about the project activities, you can check out our just launched website at oceandefendersproject.org. Some of the early outputs are uploaded there, and we're also currently collecting and writing up a global set of case studies of ocean defenders. And these will be continually uploaded to the website as they are completed. These case studies focus on ocean defenders' resistance efforts against sand mining in Cambodia, wind farm development in France, oil development in Peru, aquaculture in Chile, deep sea mining in the Pacific, port development in Bangladesh, and seismic exploration in South Africa. And that brings us to the next section of the webinar, where you will hear about several of these case studies from the Ocean Defenders Project. And with that, I would like to introduce to you Dr. Rocio Lopez de la Lama. Rocio is the Ocean Defenders Project co-lead and current manager of the project. She holds a PhD in resource management and environmental studies from the University of British Columbia and is currently a postdoc at the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the same university. She has more than 10 years of experience working with small-scale fisheries, particularly in Latin America and Peru. So over to you, Rocio.
Thank you, Nathan. Hello, everyone. Now I'm happy to present Samia Salim. She will be our first speaker for the case studies of ocean defenders. Samia Salim, she's a professor and the director of the Center for Sustainable Development at the University of Liberal Arts, Bangladesh. She's a marine social scientist and specializes in interdisciplinary areas of socio-ecological systems, sustainability science, climate change adaptation and resilience, and the science policy interface. Her current work focuses on ensuring equity in blue growth, resilience in small-scale fisheries, and ecosystems-based adaptation in coastal regions of Bangladesh. Over to you, Samia.
Thank you so much, Rocio. Nathan, you can hear me all right? Yes. Great. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'll be speaking about the case study that is working on in Bangladesh. You've already been introduced. I head the Center for Sustainable Development. It's at a private university in Bangladesh, and we work on a number of issues focused on sustainability as a whole, but my work is specifically focused in coastal systems, looking at adaptation, resilience, and justice equity issues. Next slide. So just to give a little bit of context, in Bangladesh, there's a number of existing and emerging social ecological challenges. Bangladesh is one of the most vulnerable countries facing the impacts of climate change, particularly in the coastal belt, sea level rise, increasing heat, increasing cyclones and extreme weather conditions. These communities are already having to cope, adapt, and deal with these changes. On top of that, Bangladesh is also one of the fastest growing economies in Asia, and there's a lot of attention and interest on the potential of the blue economy and different industries from shipping, transport, energy and such. So again, this space, there is a lot of conflict around marine resource use, potentials of what it can provide, but at the same time, we're focused on how does this growth, does it ensure equity and justice, and our work focuses on using, I think Nathan had showed, how does this growth also ensure food security, gender equity, social cultural impacts and such. So that's what this case study is around. So next slide. So the basis of this study is really the last 3 years. We've been trying to understand as part of a larger Belmont Forum funded project, which actually is more than 7+ countries across the globe. It's called No Crisis, and it's really to understand, look at regions around the globe where there's a lot of faster than changes, and as such, how do you negotiate the space around conflict mitigation and resolution, and how do you really bring out some of these trade-offs and look at pathways to ensure that this growth is inclusive and equitable, and how do you mitigate these conflicts. So Bangladesh is one of these 8 case studies that we've been working on the last 3 years. Next slide. So just to bring it specifically to our work is the Ocean Defenders Project case study that we are doing is in Moshkali Island, which is in the Cox's Bazar district in the southeast coast of Bangladesh. This island has traditionally been used, it's inhabited mostly by small-scale fishers, as well as used for salt production. There's a diverse range of ecosystems here, from forested hills, mangroves, coastal beaches, but mostly the people here depend on fishing, salt production, rice production, as well as a bit of dried fish and aquaculture. And traditionally, that's how it's been for as long as this country. So the next slide, yeah. At the same time, this island has been targeted for a number of blue growth investments, and it's termed the project, but it includes, as you can see, different, more than 70+ project as designated by the government, and there's a lot of international investments, particularly, there's already been the liquid gas terminal here, the Mathaberry coal plant, which is our case study is focused on, and upcoming various other construction and development here, from deep sea port to other things. At the moment, the work we focus on is on the coal plant that was funded by JICA, the Japanese corporation, and other external funders. Next slide. So as a result of this, particularly this coal plant, there has been, starting from loss of agricultural land, salt production, as well as a large number of displacement. So communities, people living here on this island in this particular area where this coal plant was built, they were literally told 2 weeks before they were called to the mainland and said that they'll have to evacuate, that they would be given compensation, they'd be given jobs, but the reality is the fishers, they lost access to the sea, where this coal plant is, you can see that was the sea, that they could access the sea, and they had to move, and only some of them got resettled into these concrete blocks of housing just in front of the coal plant. Many are still homeless, and at the same time, the environment is quite polluted there now, and people, they did not really get jobs at the factories outside. People had to get the jobs because they're not skilled enough for working here, and nearby fishing villages are also suffering because there's been lots of dredging sand taken from there to fill this construction site. Next slide. So what we did was work with a particular group of people who have been displaced, about 50 families, and we worked with the women specifically. It's a very conservative society here, so these women were not really working, but they had land. They used to grow produce in their own land. They did, bits and worked on their land, but now they can't do that, and we worked with the women who got the housing, some of them just in front of the plant, and they, talked to us about how they can't really grow anything in that concrete piece of land. And even though they were promised jobs and compensation, they never did, as well as obviously the noise and the pollution is impacting their lives now. Next slide. So what we did was, now to understand, again, this it's not like people can openly talk. I mean, Nathan mentioned about, the dangers and the problems faced by defenders. And before they were displaced, the people from this community, they had demonstrations. They went and spoke to their, local members. They tried to ensure that that they got the compensation or they got jobs, but none of that happened. And so what we did was, we came in after all that was done and this construction had already happened, and we worked with 20 of these women through stitching, embroidery workshop, arts focused workshop, to try and understand some of these conflicts and what happened to them and what they want to do now. So we used embroidery and stitching and handicrafts as a way to generate, to have dialogue, to understand, the situation there and where do they want to go from here. Next slide. We worked with artists. We worked with facilitators from Germany, from Sweden, but with very much embedded in the local culture and context. We would work with local artists there as well, and we used different creative practices over 5 days to understand what they used to do, what kind of land they had there, what they want to do now, where do they want to go from here. And so we started listening to their stories, both them, their husbands, their families, but mostly the women. Next slide. So, and then what we did was we took their work along with their stories to the capital, to Dhaka, and we invited, different stakeholders, different people, both from government, private sector, and others to showcase. The women came as well, and they talked about, what they had, what they lost, and what happens now. They were very much, living, that was their environment, their land, and they have lost both their access to the land as well as their livelihood. So, where do they want to go from there? And these women particularly, they don't want to necessarily fight to stop the development. What they want is a pathway, alternate pathway to, going forward. And they particularly want some options of livelihood through their handicrafts and stitching. Next slide. We also then took this exhibition. What we did was the women then they brought their old saris, and we did a upcycling sari. We made different clothing items from their old saris, along with the stories, and their stories. And then we took the exhibition to Japan, because this particular Kolpan was funded by the Japanese government. And then we invited them, and we showcased that, and not because of this, but as a result, as part of their protesting, and there's putting pressure on the lobby groups, and my time up, I have 1 more minute. They managed to stop the phase 2 of the Mathaburi construction, which is a win, but there's 20 plus more projects that's going to take place. So where do we go from here? Next slide. My last slide. So we have received now a bit more funding from the Environmental Defenders Collaborative funding. And what we're doing now, as you can see on the left, there's a number of projects that's going to happen here. We're working in 3 areas with both the women, because they really want to continue using their skills and training and be able to make alternate livelihoods. But we're also then forming the men and the families have a information sharing system where they can get more information of what's going to happen, and they can get information about their rights and what can be done, their financial, social, and legal rights, and have knowledge exchange and community building. So continuing on over the next number of years, they can have more of a say in the decision making, and a voice in the work that's going to happen in Mathaburi. So that's where we are now, and yeah. That's our case study from Bangladesh. Next slide. So yeah, thank you, and we hope to continue this work, and we'll be sharing and updating through this portal of this project, Ocean Defenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Samia, for such a great presentation. Interesting and fascinating type of intervention with the local women. I would like to remind everyone that if you have any questions for our speakers, please leave them in the chat, and we will review them in the Q&A session. Now, I would like to present Taryn Pereira. She's a transdisciplinary activist researcher, coordinator of the Coastal Justice Network, and a country co-director of the One Ocean Hub. Her current research is situated within solidarity networks that enable closer, more reciprocal, and more politically engaged relationships between marginalized coastal people and marine researchers. She is particularly interested in the role of researchers in enhancing the possibilities of meaningful participation of small-scale fishers and other ocean defenders in ocean governance. Taryn, you're good to go.
Thank you so much, Rocio, and hello everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here and to share some of the stories from South Africa. I'm part of the Coastal Justice Network, which has emerged from the One Ocean Hub, which is really an international transdisciplinary project looking at focused on fair, inclusive, and human rights-based decision-making for the ocean. And I'm going to be sharing a case study about the work that ocean defending small-scale fishers and their social partners have been doing to respond to offshore oil and gas exploration in South Africa, specifically in 2 court cases that were brought by community applicants to stop seismic surveys. Next slide, please. So, small-scale fishers in South Africa are increasingly claiming their identities as ocean defenders. And as Nathan shared, while this is a fairly new terminology and concept, this identity and practice of close and reciprocal relationship with the ocean is extremely deep and goes back many generations for small-scale fishers and their communities. Small-scale fishers' role as custodians and guardians of the ocean means that they are extremely concerned about and responsive to the impacts of the blue economy, which has also been outlined by Nathan. So here I just want to highlight some of the ocean defenders who we work with. Busisiwe Toby, Anna Titus, William Kolo, and Elman Mkonto. And Elman is holding a sign made by Jerry Mgomezulu, who's in the call with us today. And these are small-scale fishers from around the South African coastline, showing messages in response to various blue economy projects that they are voicing their concern about. And the loud message from small-scale fishers is that their ocean is not for sale. Next slide, please. The South African government has granted exploration permits for offshore oil and gas and other extractive activities, covering 98% of the country's exclusive economic zone. This map has been produced by an organization called the Green Connection, and actually their director Liz appeared in one of Nathan's photographs in his presentation. They've been closely monitoring and responding, along with other very active civil society organizations and social movements of coastal communities. This map shows the cumulative picture of all of the oil and gas production and exploration areas. And even in the last few days and weeks, there are additional projects that should be and need to be added to this map, including a 9,000 square kilometer seismic survey, which has just received environmental authorization off of our southern coast, due to start in January 2024. This map can be found on the Green Connection website. There's a lot of detail in there, but you can get the feeling and get the picture for the kind of border-to-border, wall-to-wall picture of exploration and production rights for offshore oil and gas. This also shows coastal mining, car power ships, and other kinds of projects. Next slide, please. I'm going to highlight two court cases that have been brought successfully by community applicants who have been concerned both about the direct impacts of seismic surveys, which are it's one of the methods of exploring for deep sea oil and gas. Coastal communities are concerned about the impacts of seismic blasting on marine life, but also concerned about the ultimate impacts of offshore oil and gas production as a result of these exploration activities. The first court case was carried out in response to small-scale fishers learning in November 2021 that a company called Impact Africa with Royal Dutch Shell was about to begin a large-scale seismic survey along the Eastern Cape Wild Coast without having consulted the people living along that coastline, including customary rights holders and small-scale fishing rights holders. And with a broad campaign made up of environmental organizations, researchers, and human rights lawyers, community members took South Africa's Department of Mineral Resources and Energy and Shell to court with strong arguments related to the improper stakeholder consultation process, the lack of proper consideration of food security, of biodiversity impact, of climate change impacts, and of the impacts on customary rights and intangible heritage of coastal communities. Here is some text from the founding affidavit, and I'm just going to read it quickly because it really captures an expression of this ocean defender identity. These are the words of Sinigugu Zukulu, who was the founding, the lead applicant in this affidavit. The Wild Coast is a place of stunning natural beauty. Unlike other coastal stretches in South Africa, Indigenous people have maintained continuous possession of this land despite waves of colonial and apartheid aggression. This is no accident. Our ancestors' blood was spilled protecting our land and sea. We now feel a sense of duty to protect our land and sea for future generations, as well as for the benefit of the planet. Our land and sea are central to our livelihood and way of life. Over generations, we have conserved them and they have conserved us. Next slide, please. So just as fishers on the East Coast were celebrating their first victory in securing an interdict against this Shell seismic survey, fisherfolk on the West Coast got disturbing news of an Australian company about to start a seismic survey on their coastline. And here, small-scale fishers and their social partners again launched an urgent interdict and really brought into their arguments strong evidence of intergenerational knowledge and livelihood and cultural practices of fishing communities along that coastline. They showed the way in which the application for this seismic survey had not considered their rights and had not considered the resources that they have a right to use from the ocean. And so again, their knowledge and their rights and claims as ocean defenders were the reason that this court case was also successful. And the judges in this case, as well as in the Shell case, found in favor of the community applicants. Next slide, please. These cases made headlines in South Africa and internationally, but the struggle is far from over. In both of these cases, the companies have appealed, and in one case, in the case of the West Coast, they have the searcher, the company wanting to undertake the seismic survey, has now been granted authorization, and the applications keep rolling in and keep being approved. These court cases are costly, and there are too many. It's not possible to mount a case in response to every new seismic survey or oil and gas production right coming our way. And in addition, ocean defenders are facing very polarizing discourse. People who are speaking out and trying to call for far more careful consideration of rights holders in decision-making around offshore oil and gas are being named in the public in the media as being blocking development, being anti-development, trying to keep coastal communities in poverty. And in rural communities a little further away from the spotlight, local political elites will speak in far more threatening ways that really imply that those standing in the way of development will need to be gotten rid of. So this is very worrying, very concerning, and therefore important that we're aware of the work of these ocean defenders and the threats that they're facing. And then my final slide, as ocean defenders, small-scale fishers should be natural allies for the marine conservation community. But unfortunately, small-scale fishers often find themselves the intense target of conservation efforts, with their use of the ocean being extremely heavily regulated and their livelihoods criminalized, particularly in marine protected areas. Small-scale fishers have said, why do we not see marine scientists and conservation organizations standing with us to resist large-scale oil and gas and other extractive blue growth activities? So a strong message today, particularly for the conservation community, is to find ways of being in solidarity with ocean defenders, even if that means taking a public stand on politically sensitive issues, and to stand with small-scale fishers and other ocean defenders to defend both the oceans and the communities who live in closest relationship with the oceans. Thank you very much.
Great. Thanks both Samia and Taryn for those rich and complex case studies of ocean defenders from around the world. I think these two stories really show the sort of complex sort of situations that many coastal communities are facing around the world, and they also highlight the proactive actions that ocean defenders are taking, often in collaboration with allied organizations, in order to protect the ocean and their rights. And of course, they also highlight some of the potential threats that ocean defenders are facing. So thank you for those stories. We're going to circle back for some more stories of ocean defenders from the perspective of ocean defenders themselves shortly. But before we do that, we're going to transition to a talk about how to best support ocean defenders. And for this talk, we have two speakers. Rocio Lopez de la Lama will be presenting this along with Philippe Lebillon. And Philippe Lebillon is a professor at the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at the University of British Columbia. And he works mainly on resource-related conflicts. And recently he co-edited with Mary Minton, an excellent book titled Environmental Defenders, Deadly Struggles for Life and Territory. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Philippe, and to Rocio to present on how to best support ocean defenders.
Thank you so much, Nathan, for this introduction. So today we're going to be talking about the range of responsibility that states, corporations, and civil society organizations have pertaining to human rights. We will also present key recommendations aimed at marine conservation organizations to adequately support ocean defenders in their resistance and mobilization efforts. So Rocio and I will be dividing the talk. I'll be talking more about the kind of main principles and obligations out there, and Rocio will be talking about examples. So both Rocio and I are collaborators of the Ocean Defenders Project and affiliated with the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs at UBC in Canada. So in the next slide, we can see a little bit of a definition there. So as illustrated in the case we just heard, ocean defenders are individuals and groups who defend and protect the marine and coastal environment, as well as the human rights of coastal populations against threats from economic activities and conservation projects that are often exacerbated by poor governance. Because of the complexity and cumulative impacts of such threats, ocean defenders need a diverse set of organization and support mechanism to advance and protect their social and environmental rights. So next slide. So who is responsible for supporting ocean defenders, and when is the best time to offer support, and also how to implement such forms of support? What forms of support should take place? Well, these are key questions that we need to answer if we want ocean defenders to succeed in their efforts. So first, based on the multiple international agreements on human rights and environmental law, national states have the mandate to ensure their citizens' rights, a point that David Boyd made very clearly. Second, a broad array of organizations, including corporations, civil society, academia, and funders, have a responsibility to protect and respect human rights. So support needs to be provided also at multiple stages pertaining to the implementation of projects. So before the project takes place, in even thinking about the project, the policy that open up, for example, acreage for oil exploitation, during the development of this project, and also well after those projects have ended, as legacy impacts sometimes need to be redressed. So there are four broad areas of support and that we are going to be listing here. The first one is to recognize and offer a platform to ocean defenders to communicate their demands at the national and international level. One of the main barriers that ocean defenders face is the lack of knowledge about international and national organizations that can actively support them in their demands and resistance efforts. So networks, access, connections are key. The second is to implement proactive strategies to identify and address the causes of human rights abuses affecting ocean defenders. Too many projects go ahead despite concerns for rights infringements, as the logic of blue growth is imposed on local communities. The third is to ensure that coastal communities have access to participation, information, and justice. And this is particularly relevant and an obligation for countries that are signatories to the Aarhus Convention and to the Latin American and Caribbean countries that have recently signed the Escazú Agreement. Finally, we need to effectively grant physical, digital, and psychological protection to ocean defenders and hold accountable the perpetrators of abuses. As has been repeatedly said, there's been too many accounts of ocean defenders suffering from intimidation, harassment, criminalization, and violence. So we'll further elaborate on these areas for state, businesses, and civil society organizations in the following slide. So the next one, we'll be looking at the obligations for states. So essentially, the states have to abide by international human rights law, as well as their own national constitutions and regulations. So governments have the mandate to protect, respect, and ensure people's set of human rights. In order to do so, we highlight 3 key areas that are particularly relevant to support ocean defenders and their causes. The first is that states must establish and implement laws, policies, and institutions protecting the marine environment and coastal livelihoods. If this is done, ocean defenders will be less likely to need to step in and resist harmful projects, often putting themselves at risk. Second, the state must prevent and address conflicts between project proponents and coastal communities. This means, for example, ensuring meaningful prior consultation and providing safe spaces for discussions between authorities, corporations, and communities. Third, states must protect the rights and safety of ocean defenders, as well as provide them with access to justice and effective remedies for violations of environmental and human rights. This includes holding perpetrators accountable, whether these are businesses or government authorities or individual government officials. This is not only about providing the means of protection and redress, but also trying to have a deterring effect on future risk of abuses. So let's now turn to the responsibility for businesses in the next slide. So international human rights laws clarify the responsibilities of businesses with regard to human rights. Here we present 4 key responsibilities aimed at corporations that invest in blue economy ventures. First, there is a need for businesses to follow environmental and social safeguards to ensure that investments are not contributing to environmental and human rights abuses. And we note here that the safeguards for foreign investments are particularly significant due to the large size of projects involved and their potential impacts. Second responsibility is to explicitly commit at the corporate level to respect and the rights relating to marine ecosystem and coastal communities. This can take place through detailed codes of conduct and formal agreements with communities, including impact benefit assessments, through which they can be held accountable. A third and related responsibility is to recognize the customary tenure rights and resource use of traditional coastal communities, as well as their livelihoods and cultural practices. This not only implies requiring the free, prior, and informed consent of communities before implementing projects, but also fairly sharing its benefits for the traditional rights holders and users. And a fourth responsibility is to carry out due diligence processes to prevent and mitigate adverse effects and impacts throughout the life cycle of the project and implement just and effective grievance mechanisms to remedy adverse impacts. So we're now going to focus on the civil society. So those in the next slide. So these include many types of organization. You've got a little diagram here. So at the core is the ocean defenders themselves, the communities, the groups and individuals that are involved in those struggles. Around them are a number of national and local NGOs and fisher associations, maybe human rights organizations and scholars, etc. And around at the periphery are the international network that can help them as well. So some organizations straddle these categories, such as NGOs protecting small-scale fishing livelihoods and associated coastal ecosystem. I'll name a few here, such as the Environmental Justice Foundation, the Coastal Justice Network, or the fisher folk organizations such as the World Forum for Fisher's People. So in the next slide, we're going to look at the responsibility for civil society organizations. So of particular importance is that civil society organizations can support ocean defenders to demand and protect their rights, as well as help report and seek redress for these rights when they are not respected. So what are the main responsibilities? So first, they can promote and themselves adopt, and it's an important point, a rights approach to protect and empower ocean defenders to claim their rights and have these respected. Second, in doing so, civil society organizations need to recognize and respect the specific cultures and belief systems of ocean defenders. They also need to recognize that defenders are interconnected and support the groups, organizations, communities, and family members around the most prominent individual defenders. Third, they need to aim for a holistic protection of ocean defenders through training and assistance encompassing their physical safety, their digital security, social and psychological well-being, as well, and very importantly, as their legal protection. So fourth, they need to account for gender and intersectional dimensions when assessing the risk and designing support and protection initiatives. So overall, their main responsibility is to exert pressure on governments to protect the rights, hold perpetrators accountable, and demand that companies be held responsible for abuses, not only within their own area of domain, but also throughout the supply chains. But they need to do so in ways that will not further harm ocean defenders or further undermine their cause. So now Rocio will consider how this responsibility play out for specific types of organizations, including in marine conservation. Rocio.
Thank you, Philippe. So in the following slides, I will share with you 8 examples of organizations already supporting ocean defenders. As you can see here, environmental organizations can provide support by setting up free legal clinics to offer counseling to coastal communities, or can also offer training opportunities to interested lawyers who would like to work in the context of environmental and human rights in the marine realm. An example of this is the Peruvian Society for Environmental Law, SPDA, which has set up multiple clinics and training courses for the benefit of artisanal fishers. Next slide, please. Environmental and human rights organizations can bring together multiple professionals and communication specialists to increase visibility to ocean defenders. For instance, the Environmental Justice Foundation focuses on in-depth collaborative field investigations, documenting the impacts of illegal fishing and overfishing on human rights. EGF then communicates these findings through high-impact reporting and media coverage. Next, please. Academic collaborations and research networks are especially important organizations as they can generate key evidence on the impacts of projects, document traditional knowledge of local communities, develop capacity training opportunities for governmental authorities and other key stakeholders, and generate recommendations grounded in evidence to inform decision-making processes. An example of such an academic collaboration is the One Ocean Hub, where Terran works. This academic network has multiple research partners across the globe with a mission to promote fair and inclusive decision-making for a healthy ocean. The next slide. Another critical example of an academic collaboration is the Environmental Justice Atlas. This global collaboration has managed to develop the largest database on socio-environmental conflicts with about 4,000 cases registered so far. In particular, to ocean defenders, EJ Atlas has over 700 registered conflicts between small-scale fishing communities and blue economy projects such as oil exploration and production or industrial fisheries. Next. Journalists and media play a critical role in documenting the struggles of ocean defenders. Local and national media are normally the first ones to report violent episodes or murders of ocean defenders, generating information that other civil society organizations can use in their support efforts. The international press, such as The Guardian or the New York Times, helps to give visibility to a global audience on these issues and frame it around a wider context of environmental threats and human rights abuses. Finally, working with dedicated journalists provides critical insights into the stories of ocean defenders and the complexities that they have to deal with. Next, please. Networks and collectives have the capacity to offer safe spaces for communities to exchange learned lessons in defending their rights and environments. There is evidence suggesting that once environmental defenders realize that they are not the only ones with these struggles, empowerment can take place and significantly improve their chances of success. Networks and collectives also offer the opportunity to have broader coalitions to advocate for rights at the national and international levels. Two examples of this are the World Forum of Fisher Peoples and the International Collective in Support of Fish Workers. Next slide, please. Funding organizations are extremely important as a lack of financial resources often contributes to putting ocean defenders in a less powerful position compared to that of corporations and governmental authorities. Funding organizations, such as the Environmental Defenders Collaborative, have the capacity to provide direct funding to ocean defenders or to allied organizations working closely with them. Funds can go towards documentation and research, networking and mobilization events, strategic litigation, broadening civic space, and increasing personal and community security. Next, please. Finally, we want to highlight 5 key responsibilities that marine conservation NGOs in particular need to take into account. First, actively integrate ocean defenders and coastal communities in the process of decision-making, such as marine spatial planning processes. Moreover, when working towards the sustainable use of marine resources, strive for co-management schemes. Second, see ocean defenders as allies and strategically support their perspectives and ways of living, including artisanal fishing. Many coastal communities have a strong cultural bond with fishing, so strategies like alternative livelihoods are not always suitable or accepted. Third, support indigenous and traditional community-led conservation practices, for instance, customary fisheries closures, and work towards their official recognition by governmental authority. Fourth, help ocean defenders gain visibility at the national and international levels, and strategically provide support for their struggles in political spaces they don't have access to usually. And finally, focus on building and supporting networks and coalitions of ocean defenders. This approach not only empowers local communities, but also amplifies their voices and the legitimacy of their struggles. Next, please. An example of a marine NGO that is currently supporting ocean defenders is the Peruvian Office of Oceana. Earlier this year, a severe oil spill took place in Peru, which affected thousands of artisanal fishers. Despite the limited budget, Oceana's Peru team is now providing technical advice to local NGOs that are seeking compensatory actions from Repsol, the company responsible for the oil spill. Oceana Peru is also keeping track of the proposed mitigation plans by governmental authorities, providing technical expertise so that artisanal fishers know if such mitigation plans will be effective or not. The final slide. To conclude, first, we want to emphasize the collective moral responsibility of states, businesses, and civil society organizations in supporting ocean defenders. Second, it is indispensable to follow a human rights lens across the different stages of project implementation and provide integrated support mechanisms that ensure ocean defenders' safety. And finally, marine conservation organizations are urged to actively involve ocean defenders in decision-making processes, respect their perspectives on traditional practices, and provide them with visibility and support in political spaces. This participatory and inclusive approach would ensure effectiveness and sustainability of the marine conservation efforts. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Rocio and Philippe, for that detailed discussion of the role of various allied organizations in supporting ocean defenders. I think, for different individuals from organizations on this call, I think they should see that as an invitation to engage. There's a lot of need for support for ocean defenders around the world. And for those that are interested to see those details again, I just want to note to everybody that this is being recorded, and the recording will be posted, and we will circulate that to all attendees after the call. So you'll be able to look again at those details on those slides. And that brings us to the next section of the webinar, wherein we'll hear from ocean defenders themselves. And we have three different presentations here in this section. First, we're going to present a video of the Mapuche peoples of Los Lagos in Chile, who will be talking about their efforts to safeguard their territories and communities. But before we show the video, I just want to introduce Francisco Arraos, who is going to introduce the video. Francisco is an associate professor at the Universidad de Los Lagos in Chile. He's a social anthropologist with a PhD from the Universidad Estadual de Campinas in Brazil. His research focuses on the governance of coastal and marine ecosystems and local communities' relationships with nature. He currently leads the project Antropología de la Conservación, which is closely collaborating with the Mapuche people from Los Lagos region in supporting their organization to reclaim their rights and access to the sea. Over to you, Francisco, to introduce the video.
Thank you, Nathan, and hello, everyone. I'm going to talk in Spanish, and I'm going to introduce some of the leaders. Entonces, mi nombre es Francisco Arauz y voy a presentar a dos líderes, además del video. Justo ellos están en este momento conectados y solo les pido para que puedan saludarnos. Está Joana.
Hola, soy Joana de Chile.
Y está Juan Catín, me parece que está conectado. Si estás conectado, solo puedas decir hola. Y no sé si está conectado.
Sí, hola, estoy conectado aquí, saludos.
Bueno, Juan y Joana son dos de los 4 líderes de comunidades indígenas de la Patagonia chilena. Son comunidades mapuche, huilliche, que están llevando una lucha para ejercer los derechos territoriales sobre el mar a partir de la implementación de la ley conocida como Ley Lafkenche, que el afkenche, la lengua mapuche, significa gente del mar. Y estos derechos se ejercen a través de la creación de los espacios costeros marinos para pueblos originarios. Estas son un tipo de área protegida, donde las comunidades protegen sus usos consuetudinarios, sus costumbres y los ecosistemas que sostienen esos modos de vida, ejerciendo una forma de conservación que los incluye, una conservación inclusiva, que además los coloca al centro del modelo de gobernanza y también en la primera línea de la defensa del mar. Lo que les vamos a presentar ahora es un video con las palabras de los cuatro líderes y los dejo ahí invitados a poder conocer más de la experiencia de los Ocean Defenders de la Patagonia chilena. Muchas gracias.
Mari Mari Compuché, soy Joana Coñuecar Yancapani, del espacio costero Mañigüey-Cohuinay, ubicado en la comuna de Gualeguay.
Mi nombre es José Molina Guaychán, soy coordinador de la Asociación de Comunidades Mapuche Huilliche en Pucarelmapu.
Hola, mi nombre es Pamela Mayorga Caro, soy de la ciudad de Chaitén, en la región de los lagos. Soy asesora técnica local del espacio costero marino de pueblos originarios Islas de Sertori y Costa de Chaitén.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Juan Catín Chauquemán, pertenezco a la localidad de Huil, soy presidente de la comunidad indígena de Huil y actuales solicitantes del ENCO Huequi Huil.
Quiero contarles que los espacios costeros son una figura de derecho que tienen las comunidades indígenas a nivel país, ¿cierto?, para solicitar espacios de mar que les permitan resguardar sus usos tradicionales, ¿cierto?, sus usos cotidianos, tradicionales y consuetudinarios, y que permite también el territorio geográfico necesario para que sus usos puedan desarrollarse.
La razón o la lógica de la solicitud netamente tiene que ver con la protección de estos espacios y de sus costumbres.
Lo que está a mi espalda es Chocoy, que es un lugar de amplio uso y que fue reconocido por CONADI hace aproximadamente 15 días. El objetivo de la EMPO es poder proteger la biodiversidad marina existente en nuestro territorio y buscar el desarrollo de las comunidades locales a través de actividades de emprendimiento sostenible y que esté en armonía con el medio ambiente.
En el cual lo integran comunidades indígenas, algunos sindicatos de pesca artesanal, ambientalistas locales, personas que trabajan en el turismo. Nuestra EMPO se generó así en relación a las bases sociales del territorio para poder ser parte del maritorio y podamos ser integrados también en mesas de decisiones.
Hoy día es una figura de derecho, ¿cierto?, que tenemos para resguardar nuestra cultura, para poner en práctica también sentido solidario, el sentido vinculante también con otras organizaciones del territorio, que permite también volver a reeducarnos y refortalecer nuestra cultura ligada al mar.
Tenemos grandes amenazas y una de ellas tiene que ver con el avance de la gran industria hacia nuestras costas, que provoca una gran contaminación y que afecta a la biodiversidad.
Netamente porque la industria no tiene esa conciencia o esa visión generalizada que traen las culturas o la gente que pobla estos lugares. Fue así como en el año 2020 se hizo admisible la solicitud de ENCO para el espacio costero marino Huequi Huil. ¿Cuál es la intención de futuro en esto? Poder proteger y seguir conservando nuestros recursos como han sido a través del tiempo y a la vez mantener el sustento diario que siempre nos ha otorgado estos espacios, siguiendo las prácticas y las costumbres que la gente de estos lugares mantiene.
También los espacios costeros son instancias que propician un trabajo en relación a la soberanía alimentaria que generan las comunidades indígenas hoy día también. También permite buscar las instancias de adaptarnos al cambio climático, a la crisis climática que hoy día estamos viviendo como sociedad. Y a la vez también es una figura que permite crear una gobernanza distinta, no a las tradicionales que conocemos, ¿cierto?, en el país o en el mundo, sino que propicia, ayuda, contribuye a generar una gobernanza donde la opinión de cada uno de los actores locales es fundamental para llegar a acuerdos y definir el territorio en el que queremos vivir y en el que queremos proyectarnos aquí a 50 años.
La mejor planificación que se pueda generar en el territorio, en donde nosotros y el territorio son conocedores de ello, de los espacios sagrados, de los espacios donde están los bancos naturales, y la idea de ello es poder tener una gestión local y sustentable de ellos, y que sea de forma integral, o sea, todos nos sentemos a la misma mesa a conversar el mejor futuro que queremos para nuestro territorio y maritorio. Así también poder trabajar y conversar con personas que viven también en la cordillera, porque nuestro territorio abarca mar y cordillera, en donde el mar también es tan importante para la gente de la cordillera, así como para la agricultura, en el sentido de poder tener algas para el fertilizante de sus campos.
Conservar significa cuidar, proteger, para que las futuras generaciones también tengan la oportunidad de disfrutar y vivir en relación con la biodiversidad que tenemos en estos rincones. Por lo tanto, nuestro mayor foco de preocupación y que nos alienta en el trabajo es el objetivo de cuidar el espacio, protegerlo, valorarlo y, por supuesto, transmitirle esa valoración a las futuras generaciones.
Nuestra idea de futuro es que estos espacios sean administrados por sus propios habitantes, no solo comunidades, sino todos los habitantes que componemos el borde costero, ya que siempre hemos sido los que hemos mantenido o los que hemos actuado en base a nuestros conocimientos en estos lugares.
Estos espacios costeros propician diversas acciones y entre eso también el sentido de resguardar, el sentido de conservar, una definición de conservación que las comunidades indígenas las tenemos tan intrínseca en nuestra vida, ¿cierto? Es una conservación que se da con el subir y bajar las mareas, con el entendimiento del clima para poder ejercer usos tradicionales como la pesca y la recolección de mariscos.
Gracias, Francisco, Joana y Juan, para compartir un poco de su historia y la visión de los Mapuche de los lagos. Francisco, did you want to share any last thoughts after the video?
No, me parece que no, solo despedirme y agradecerle la presencia a Juan y a Joana que están acá participando. Y bueno, los dejamos invitados a seguir la información que a través del proyecto Ocean Defender vamos a ir publicando. Ya está el caso de estudio, de hecho, en la página web de los Ocean Defenders, donde pueden tener más información al respecto. Y eso, muchas gracias, Nathan, por la invitación.
Great, thank you as well. Next, we have a presentation by Jesu Rethenam. Jesu Rethenam is an activist in fisheries, women's, and other social movements, and she's on the coordination committee of the World Forum of Fisher People. She's a permanent invitee of the National Fish Workers Forum, a core committee member of the Women's Forum of NFF, and the convener of the Coastal Action Network. She is also a director of SNEHA, the NGO working for livelihood rights of the fisher communities and the protection and promotion of coastal ecology for the past 48 years. SNEHA was one of the NGOs that led the post-tsunami interventions in 2004, as well as responses to other disasters. Jesu, it's over to you for your presentation.
Thank you. As introduced, I am Jesu Rethenam, coming from India, from WFOP. And
they were from a fisher people.
Let me say that the first slide shows about the ocean people civilization. See, internationally, globally, all the civilizations are recorded and documented, and it becomes part of the study. We have the River Valley civilization, but we have not heard of Ocean Valley civilization at all. This is what is Ocean Valley civilization. The people who had their governance rights in the ocean, and they are the that civilization has to be recorded. That is, here in this meeting, I am here to talk about concepts of many have been talking about the struggles and other things. Fine, that is very important. But at the same time, we have to, as movement, we feel that we have to lobby for our concepts also, and with the UN organizations, with the state governments and other things. Next slide, please. So, all the ocean, we, the ocean people, now the ocean rights, the rights in the ocean resources are taken away by the blue economy. This is what the blue economy, this slide speaks about. The name of blue economy, as you know, globally, all the industries and different industries and projects are being promoted. The ocean space is divided and fishes don't have rights. They are just moved away, displaced, and they are not having their rights, and they have to fight for their rights. Next slide, please. So here we talk of, see, as I told you, the ocean, blue economy is taking the most of the spaces, and this is talking of ocean economy. Globally, prior to COVID-19 pandemic, OECD projected doubling of the ocean economy. The ocean resources are seen as economy, not fisher's rights. From 2010 to 2013, to reach 3 trillion USD and employed 40 million people. What does it mean? All the industries are going to come on the ocean and the coast. Then what will happen to the fishers' rights? That is what the ocean defenders are doing, defending the rights of fishers. So let me explain the concepts. Next slide, please. Yeah, ocean people. Capture fisher peoples of marine and inland, commonly called as fisher people, not as SSF. Let us talk of fisher people. Ocean economy, fisher people's commons are scaled and valued. In terms of revenue, it is not ocean resources are converted and seen as revenues. That means it is allowing all industries to come. Next is ocean grab of fisher people's resources. By these all blue economy projects being promoted. Fisher people's rights are collective, customary in nature. Our fish, our land, our water. We belong to the ocean. We are the custodians and defenders. That is, we are ocean people. So these defenders are being targeted. Even when we promote a concept. So that is what this slide speaks of. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah. Next is about the Conference of Ocean People, what we believe as our rights, what we are fighting for. So we reject the corporate-led false climate solutions, which is being promoted everywhere. by the UN organizations and also corporations who are neither stakeholders of the oceans nor should be the primary decision makers. We remind the world that the earth has been brought to its current disastrous state by all these 1 minute. Yeah, by all these institutions and the steps. We demand recognition of the ocean people by nation states and international organizations. We are here to assert ourselves and affirm our presence and articulate our historical, traditional, customary rights over the oceans. We are to reassert our rights to capture fisheries. Then next comes the restitution, whereby the ocean people unitedly reclaim the customary governance, what they were exercising earlier, how they were governing, and the ocean resources. We demand restitution of open governance to ocean communities. Resist what we are doing now as ocean defenders, resisting the blue paradigms and all the projects being promoted by the blue economy policies and the projects. We demand reimagination. This is a very important thing. We have to reimagine our future within the ocean, whereby the ocean and its resources are responsibly not only brought back to us, but conserved. I would like to point out here, the state should frame and legislation to protect the people who are conserving their nature. That is what the first speaker, the UN rapporteur, spoke. That is correct. As at the same time, in the name of conservation, the another speaker really pointed out that fishes are being targeted, but all the oil drilling industries are allowed. This is a controversy. So we are saying the governance rights should be with us. Next slide, please. So our ocean, our future rights and our future. So who are ocean defenders? I have already explained. Those who are trying to not only fight with the at the local level or globally or regionally against these development projects which affect the fishes. At the same time, who try to promote and lobby and influence the state with the concepts. So here I am talking of concepts. What are our contributions? What are our challenges? As WFP, the remarkable contributions are 3 years, 2017, we had a primer on ocean grabbing with concepts of ocean grabbing, which happened in 2000 in Delhi. In 2020, the Blue Economy Tribunal and the impacts of fishers and coastal communities happened, which brought out a lot of issues in the South Asia and Southeast Asia's level in 5 countries. And 2022, the Conference of Ocean People was organized from 26th June to 30th June, which emphasized the rights of ocean people. Challenges. So till now, that is what I'm trying to say. There is no recognition and representation of fisher peoples in the in any coastal states or small island developing states. There is no legislation recognizing customary law while legally ensuring the historical customary rights of fisher people. And though there is VGSSF guidelines, it is not implemented. So non-implementation itself creates a lot of problem. The resistance of movements of the oppressed people by the state and corporates, or oppressed the state and corporates, for the coastal human rights defenders and activists are attacked. So, who are the ocean defenders and the ocean people and the resources, ocean resources? So these customary governance rights has to be enacted, to become a law globally, and that should be recognized. And so we are moving towards that for requesting you to support us in this concept development and influencing the UN negotiating with the UN organizations and the state to recognize the community, the ocean community rights. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jesu, for just the emphasis on how the ocean economy is really taking up much of the space in the ocean. And of course, reminding us of the role of fisher people in protecting rights in this space. Also, I take away from your talk the real importance of greater recognition and representation of fisher peoples in ocean governance at all levels, from national to international conversations and deliberation processes. Next, we have a presentation from Paula James Garces. Paula is a Rizal woman and young community leader from Old Providence and Catalina Islands in Colombia. She was the first director of the iFish Association and works as a strategic assessor of this initiative, which brings together artisanal fishers working on food sovereignty, as well as social and environmental justice. She is a member of the Old Providence and Catalina Fishermen Federation, was involved in the Rizal Dignity Camp, a social mobilization against the territorial dispossession of Rizal people in the context of exclusionary post-Hurricane Iota disaster recovery strategies. She's a social worker from the University of Cartagena and has training in environmental management and planning, as well as intercultural and environmental development from the University of Magdalena. Over to you, Paula.
Okay, thank you, Nathan, for the introduction. Also, hello to all the participants and to everybody that in the scenario. I will make my presentation in Spanish. Buen día, mi nombre es Paola, como ya lo introdujo Nathan. Le agradezco y saludo a todas las personas que participan del espacio. Efectivamente, me presento desde la isla de Providencia. En este momento estoy en el sector de suroeste. La isla de Providencia está ubicada en el Caribe colombiano y hace parte del archipiélago de San Andrés, Providencia y Santa Catalina. Después de 2021 sufrió uno de los acontecimientos históricos más fuertes en lo que va incluso de mi memoria, porque pasa el huracán Iota, que fue de una categoría 5 y destruyó alrededor del 98% de toda la infraestructura de la isla. No solamente se destruyó la infraestructura, sino que también los lazos sociales, comunitarios se vieron afectados por toda la intervención que vino después de esto. Como es acostumbrado en la mayor parte de los territorios del Caribe y de otros lugares del mundo, la intervención que se dio después de este fenómeno fue precisamente desde los cuerpos militares y desde ese tipo de instituciones, y en un lugar que para nosotros representaba un gran valor ecosistémico y valor ambiental, se tuvo la pretensión, que venía desde antes y que no había sido aceptada, de construir una base de guardacostas en un lugar, como ya lo mencionaba, que era un arroyo, un ecosistema de mangle y además un humedal. En ese momento, las comunidades de pescadores organizan un movimiento llamado Campamento por la Dignidad, que se esperó durara 3 meses, 2 semanas, pero no 728 días y algo más. En ese momento nos dimos cuenta que era necesario no solamente proteger la vida de las personas o de los seres humanos, sino también de todo lo no humano que al final también hacía parte de nuestra vida. Se instala el Campamento por la Dignidad y en ese lugar los pescadores hacen esa defensa porque es el lugar precisamente en el que nacen los peces que después precisamente se dan en relación con la pesca, pero también es un lugar que para la memoria de la isla significa mucho. Nos damos cuenta que ese sistema no solamente, o los océanos, los mares no solamente están siendo amenazados por acciones de instalación militar, sino que también tienen la afectación del extractivismo y de la no conciencia de todo lo que puede significar los ambientes y los ecosistemas para las comunidades en distintos lugares del mundo. En este caso, una comunidad étnica, una comunidad raizal que tiene una cosmovisión, que habita, que piensa junto con el mar, que organiza su tiempo, sus espacios en relación al mar y en relación a las montañas y en relación a esa conexión precisamente que hay entre la montaña, el mar, el arroyo y todo lo que se puede ver más allá de lo que se puede extraer. Esa precisamente ha sido la defensa del campamento por la dignidad, mostrar que la pesca no solamente es una posibilidad de extracción económica, sino que hace parte de un ejercicio que ha permitido que los lazos comunitarios se hayan tejido durante muchos años y que significa la memoria no solamente de los pescadores, sino de las personas que habitan y que conforman estas comunidades que no solamente son de personas, sino que también son, no solamente son de humanos, sino que también son de seres no humanos. En ese sentido, también se hace una propuesta desde las economías locales porque precisamente no había una posibilidad de abastecer o de garantizar ciertas soberanías sobre la alimentación. Y lo que hacen este grupo de personas, que fuimos alrededor de 400 personas, es empezar a articular con otros grupos y otras comunidades dentro de la isla. Comunidades de agricultores, comunidades de artistas, comunidades de jóvenes. Y en esa medida se empiezan a tejer unos lazos en los que ya no solamente es una lucha por el territorio, sino que es una lucha por precisamente la comunidad raizal. En ese momento yo no muestro una fotografía, ni un video, ni una imagen que sea visual, porque hasta cierto punto se desborda todo lo que podría mostrarse en relación a eso. En ese momento la lucha ha cobrado otras dimensiones precisamente porque la pesca artesanal, pensada como pesca artesanal, no solamente como desde su dimensión económica, sino también desde lo cultural, lo ecosistémico, lo espiritual, se está viendo amenazada por la pesca industrial, que es respaldada por sistemas económicos que hasta cierto punto sobrepasan en algunos momentos las intervenciones cotidianas de la gente. Entonces ha sido una disputa no solamente social, sino que ha sido una disputa también jurídica, ha sido una disputa en todos los escenarios, desde la educación también, para que esos procesos no solamente sean una acción, sino que sean una praxis en todo lo que se significa. Hemos dicho que pensamos con el mar, que también es no sé si acabando el tiempo. Y hemos dicho que es una necesidad que se empiece a entender que la pesca no solamente es un proceso económico, que también se piensa desde los sentimientos y desde la vida. En ese sentido, hemos hecho acciones para que la pesca en el departamento pueda transitar de la pesca industrial a la pesca artesanal, para que las acciones extractivistas no sean permitidas, para que no se consienta la acción violenta hacia nuestros recursos, porque precisamente son recursos que si bien son diversos, también son escasos. Se ha pedido el reconocimiento del maritorio, específicamente del maritorio que concierne al departamento archipiélago de San Andrés, Providencia y Santa Catalina, como sujeto de derechos y en ese sentido de protección. Asimismo, se ha pedido que que la pesca artesanal del departamento sea reconocida como patrimonio no solamente de la comunidad raizal, sino también de la nación. Y que se entienda que tratados en los que, por ejemplo, se ceden derechos de pesca a otros países, en este caso Estados Unidos con el Tratado Vázquez-Sacio, vulnera nuestros derechos étnicos y vulnera nuestra presencia en estos lugares. Esas son algunas de nuestras demandas. Asimismo, demandamos que las comunidades, no solamente raizales, sino también indígenas, puedan habitar el mundo sin miedo, puedan vivir en relación a los ecosistemas que les han mantenido durante años, sean entendidas en esa relación compleja y no se simplifiquen a simplemente una acción económica que puede ser instrumentalizada o puede ser cooptada por cualquier corporación o empresa. Demandamos que las comunidades indígenas, pero también las comunidades del mundo puedan vivir en una paz que se ejercite desde ese reconocimiento precisamente de los ecosistemas que están alrededor de nosotros y en los que habitamos y de los que somos parte y los que nos configuran hasta cierto punto en nuestras creaciones culturales y cambios y desafíos y expectativas. Y demandamos que las comunidades y los pueblos del mundo puedan vivir de la manera en que decidan, tomando decisiones sobre su futuro. El Campamento por la Dignidad no solamente defendió un lugar físico, sino que también defendió la posibilidad de las comunidades pesqueras, de las mujeres, de los hombres y de los jóvenes, de tomar decisiones sobre su futuro. En el Campamento por la Dignidad se instaló una sala de gobierno que logró hacer que los actores, no solamente locales, sino nacionales e internacionales, llegaran a ese lugar porque era precisamente el lugar que habíamos decidido para hablar y para que se tomaran las decisiones. Entonces fue una oportunidad en la que se pudo mirar a los ojos a quienes estaban en esa responsabilidad de poder y que tal vez no la habían ejercido de una manera responsable o respetuosa de nosotros, y decirles qué era lo que queríamos para nuestro futuro más allá de lo que ellos suponían o hacían en relación a otros intereses distintos a los nuestros. Eso es un poco de lo que fue el Campamento por la Dignidad. Yo voy a agradecer que si tienen alguna pregunta la puedan hacer para no extenderme el tiempo. Muchas gracias.
Hello, everyone. I'm back. I've just lost connection there for a short moment. Thank you so much, Paula, for sharing this story and the story of the social mobilization of the Raizal people. I think the story that you share for me really reminds me that ocean defenders are collectives, often operating as part of a group who have a strong vision for their place, a strong connection to that place. And it's not just individuals who are often the ones that are featured in stories of environmental defenders and ocean defenders. So behind any individual is this broader collective of ocean defenders. We have perhaps just a few minutes for questions. Rocio, do you want to turn your camera on? Do we have enough time for perhaps posing one question to some of the speakers?
Sure, yes. I don't know if anyone in the audience has a question they would like to post in the chat. If not, I can go ahead and I have some questions. Well, I would like to ask Samia a question. Samia, I couldn't help to notice that the proponent of the coal plant is a Japanese company, and also one of the founders of your project is JICA, I think, from the Japanese corporation. How was the, yeah, how did you deal with that? Oh. Okay, well, I think Samia is not here right now. So Karthik has posted a question in the chat, and I think it's for it's a question for Jesu. Well, because of the time, perhaps one of big picture questions I will pose to all the panelists is that what type of supports you think would be key right now for the different case studies you're working with, either the coastal communities dealing with oil exploration in South Africa or the Chilean fishers in setting up their own MPAs? What would you think would be like the key support that would push their resistant efforts to the next level?
Rocío, maybe I can answer that question. I'm going to answer in Spanish. So for the translation. Bueno, y voy a ser breve. Para nosotros en este momento, o para las comunidades con las cuales trabajamos, yo diría que existen dos grandes elementos clave. Uno tiene que ver con comunicación en términos de cómo accedemos a otros espacios de público y otros espacios de decisión, principalmente pensando en el público menos especializado. A nivel nacional e internacional, consumidores, por ejemplo, en nuestro caso tiene que ver con el consumo del salmón y la industria del salmón, y cuáles son los problemas que esto causa en las localidades, y al mismo tiempo cuál es la propuesta de conservación y de defensa del mar que están haciendo las comunidades, y eso hay que comunicarlo extensamente. Yo diría que ahí hay un gap, una laguna que no hemos logrado sobrepasar del todo. Estamos en ese proceso. Y el otro elemento tiene que ver con el control político o el accountability político que se puede hacer en nuestro caso, o en el caso de Chile, en referencia a las posibles reformas que se hagan a una ley que ya entrega derechos, y cómo se han ido colocando ciertas narrativas que buscan conflictuar o generar un conflicto entre comunidades de defensores oceánicos que tienen ciertas diferencias, por ejemplo, entre la pesca artesanal y las comunidades de pueblo originario, las comunidades indígenas, donde la reforma implica reducir derechos de uno para entregar derechos al otro, cuando en realidad debería ser una lucha más bien común o una estrategia común. Entonces, desde ese punto de vista es importante cómo una red internacional como los Ocean Defenders puede apoyar o monitorear esos procesos políticos de larga escala. Yo diría que esos son dos grandes elementos claves que podría una red como esta o un proyecto como este podría apoyar.
Genial, gracias Francisco. I don't know if any one of the other panelists would like to also answer that question.
Looks like Jesu.
Sure about whether I am answering this question, but I would like to answer the question raised to me, and also by Chole Nan about the fund engagement, what they can fund and other things. So that I would like to answer. Can I answer, or
go ahead? Go ahead,
yeah.
Jesu.
Yeah. The question raised about India was how the Sagarmala and Sagarmala is nothing but all the blue economy projects. We have a blue economy policy in India also. So which is not very much fully, but all the projects on the coast are targeted the sea and everything, based on the blue economy. There is deep sea mining and name everything, all the different components there, it is there. So the Bharatmala is nothing but linked to Sagarmala. All the road projects, waterways, inland waterways, everything. So definitely it has a lot of impact on the ocean people as well as the coastal communities. So there is no doubt about it. So we are fighting as the community, as the movement, we are fighting against it. And there are also efforts to map now. Coastal regulation zone management plans are being framed, and it is coming for debate before the community. So we are trying to, through that mapping, we are trying to say that these are our lands, these are our water. So, and present it before the state so that they approve it. But the community will do it and the community will approve it and then present it. It's a very hard exercise, but trying to do something constructively. Instead of always we are doing, so that is that. Next is about what you can do. We can try to support projects that are involved in negotiation with the state and also other projects of promoting these concepts. Thank you.
Great. Great. Thank you, Jason, for your responses to that question. Unfortunately, we're out of time for questions now. I would love to hear a lot more from all the panelists, and I'm sure you all have questions, so feel free to reach out afterwards. To close today's webinar, I want to turn it over to Kristen Walker-Panamia. Kristen is the current chair of the IUCN Commission on Environmental, Economic, and Social Policy. And she's also the Senior Vice President of the Center for Communities and Conservation at Conservation International. As a chair, she is committed to promoting research and policies to balance nature conservation with socioeconomic and cultural concerns. Over to you, Kristen.
Thanks, Nathan. And really, it's very hard to bring together these closing remarks with such a rich amount of information that everyone has shared. But I think that that the work that we're trying to do collectively on this Ocean Defenders project really brings to light many of the issues that you all highlighted today, from really the focus and the need of understanding ocean people and fisher people and those needs, to making sure that we're really understanding the mapping that is out there and understanding where those defenders are, as highlighted with the Atlas. And I really think it's how do we balance the expansion of the ocean economy with ocean justice, and the need to make sure that rights-based approaches are adopted, that various cultures and practices are respected, but more that holistic approach to protection where communities are leading those efforts and making sure that communities are at the table with respect to decision-making process. And I also felt that the highlight of how you really understand how to negotiate ocean conflicts collectively is an important practice, because I think we're going to see that more and more as the ocean economy continues to expand. And then finally, I think just highlighting the need for raising that profile, raising that knowledge, and then the need for broader communications, not only at the local level, but scaling them up to the regional and national level, and how networks that we have here are really helping to educate, but bring together those tools that are needed. And I think, we heard a lot about what is going on and what various experiences are developing in terms of tools, but I think the approach to understanding what tools are needed more and more, and how organizations like IUCN or like my own organization, CI, can be better prepared in making sure that we integrate human rights lens and support mechanisms into the work that we do, but also that we partner with organizations that can provide legal support where necessary, where oftentimes we fall short on those issues. Overall, I think the expansion of these issues and understanding them, but really helping to support ocean defenders is of utmost importance today. And I'm actually sitting here in Dubai as we're about to talk about climate. So it's very front of mind in these discussions, and and I'm sitting here, I think the delegation from Fiji and Palau are at my hotel. So hearing their voices and hearing all of your voices today about what is going on is extremely important. I think we need to continue to build the network. CESP is committed to continue working and supporting the Ocean Defenders project, and that we continue to get those voices out, but also bring broader attention to those. Nathan, I'm going to stop there because I know we're short on time. So I'll pass it back to you.
Great. And with that, that brings our webinar to a close. Thanks for listening. With this webinar, we hope that we've really raised your awareness of the plight of ocean defenders, the need to bring greater attention to ocean defenders in discussions of environmental human rights defenders, and the need for greater support and safeguards for ocean defenders. If you're interested to learn more about ocean defenders, please check out the project website and read some of our initial papers on the topic and some of the case studies that are posted on the website. And of course, feel free to reach out to any of the speakers if you have questions. We thank you again for your time, and we can stop the recording now. Thank you.